You're now listening to Voices of Lynn. My name is Justice, and I'll be your host for this episode of Table Talks. For this series, I'll be speaking with local residents, business owners, elected officials, students, as well as current and former employees of businesses here in Lynn to discuss how the COVID-19 pandemic has had an effect on them either personally or professionally, and what are some of the things that they're doing to get through it. I do want to make it clear that the opinions of our guests are theirs alone and do not reflect the opinions of our host or Voices of Lynn podcast. I've got Michael Satterwhite on the line today. Michael's the president of Satterwhite Law Firm and a member of Lynn Public School Committee, and he also serves on the board of multiple organizations based out of Lynn, including the North Shore Latino Business Association. Mike, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with me on this podcast, and also thank you again for being a trusted voice in the community.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Anytime. I appreciate giving input and being part of the conversation.
Great. And before we get into some of the main topics for this brief episode, I wanted to ask you how you and your family are doing, because I know you guys, you being involved in the school system and running a business, having a family. How are you and your family doing dealing with these disruptions to school and business?
We're holding up. My wife is a nurse. She's a nurse practitioner, and she works for Middleton Family Medicine, and it's an urgent care facility. So she was going into the office on a per diem basis, and they've asked that all of the nurses do telemedicine, which has been great. So she's been able to work from home, and I've been able to work from home. And we have two young kids and one almost teenager, so it's been a pretty dynamic period of time.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you guys are getting through it and finding some ways to adapt. I know you guys are probably seeing a lot of people having some tough times adapting to this and adjusting. So really what I wanted to do is I've been scanning a lot of people's posts from different groups and personal pages. I think a lot of people, not yourself really, but a lot of people are not sure really where or how to express themselves in a time like this. And one of the things you posted recently really stood out to me, so I just wanted to mention that briefly and get your thoughts on that to elaborate a little bit further. The other day you wrote, "At what point did we forget that we are the economy and that without a healthy and active society, our money has no value?" Now, the post was a bit longer than those two lines, but what really stood out to me were those two. And I wanted to ask if you could just elaborate for the listeners who might not really understand how the economy works and really what that has to do with health in this current pandemic.
I've been lucky to be able to travel the world, and every place I go, I keep some of the money from that visit, and I do it because it's more than just a piece of paper. It's an experience, Right. When I went to the UAE, I experienced a different culture. I experienced the luxuries that Dubai and Abu Dhabi have to offer, and that obviously comes on the back of their people.
Right.
So, that's really what I mean. When people are spending the American dollar, the value of that dollar stems directly to the American people. We spend and we make and we buy, and that's what makes our dollar strong. So it's people just look at the dollar and just think that it's government money, and they don't realize that without us, there's no government. And the last line on that post, I said, without us, for cities and towns, without us, it's just a bunch of land.
Right.
People don't realize that our property taxes pay for the public school system. Without revenues, you can't have things.
Right.
And that's when, the state comes in and they have a pool of money from multiple cities and towns, and the state sales tax, and that's how they're able to come in and do, these takeovers or conservatorships. And it's just people, it seems like over time, people just are disconnected from the makeup of the Constitution and the makeup of our country and the makeup of communities. It's just, it's us against them, and they're pointing at a bunch of elected officials, not understanding that those people got there because they were elected, and they're supposed to represent the people of their districts, the people of their states, their interests. So it's crazy, and I think that it got to that particular point based off of our two-party political system, and it's always forms of education, and you're replacing it with consumption of biased news, it doesn't help either. It sets us farther apart. So it's crazy. We should have more libraries. We should have more opportunities for people to learn, not the other way around.
Right on. Well, I thank you for sharing that perspective. If I could ask to dig a little bit deeper on that, because you mentioned how, the government is supposed to represent us, and it is their job. It's not like this out of the realm for us to be asking to be safe and protected, especially when we're contributing towards this economy. And we know that with classism, there's been a lot of people who've already been suffering things that the common person is experiencing now. And some people definitely are questioning whether or not our local governments, whether it's state, city, or federal, like there's so many questions about who is really accountable for this, because if it's us being accountable to hold them accountable, we're either not doing a good enough job or something's being misunderstood.
Well, again, I have to go back to the two-party system, and that's my issue. So, Massachusetts is a Democratic state. Mm-hmm. It's safe because we have more registered Democrats, but we don't always vote Democrat. We have a Republican governor. Right. At one point we had a Republican senator for a long period of time, and then it's just been two Democratic senators. So when I'll give you an example, Seth Moulton, he represents the district in Essex County. Okay, mm-hmm. He doesn't just represent Democrats; he represents Republicans. He should definitely hear the other side, because again, these are people that are in his district. Okay, right. So. And then, there are companies like GE and a few other, major, like Raytheon type businesses here that, our economy depends on. Right. So for him to always just vote the way the party is voting is not beneficial to his district. I'm not criticizing him. I'm not saying that's what he does, but I'm just using that as an example. Right. And that's just the issue. So people feel as though they don't have voices because the person that's supposed to represent them isn't representing their best interest. And that can feel as though, hey, listen, I'm paying my taxes. Those taxes have been paying your salaries, right, which are, a ridiculous amount of money. And then you're not even listening to me. You're not even heeding to what is going to grow your district and the businesses in their district, and better the schools in your district, or help the cities and towns in your districts. And I think that's just the issue. You think
another party would be helpful, or more parties?
I'm not pushing that. I'm a Democrat, and I'm a proud Democrat. I just think the people need to think for themselves. At the same time, you can't just always just go with the flow.
Okay.
And especially when you have a district that could possibly be diverse. You could look at the Essex County district that Seth represents. There's a large number of Republicans. I'm friends with them. I can think of a few that I have very hearty discussions with, and we don't always agree on the same thing. But sometimes it's the outcome that we agree with, but not the way to get there.
Right. Okay.
And I think that's where we're yelling over each other most of the time. When if we sit down, you can see that we probably have more in common than we think. And
100% agree.
It's an unfortunate place to be in, and I'd say the past 20 years it's been been pushing that way, maybe even 30 years, or as long as I can remember. And I think that's what people say. Listen, I'm being taxed. My money is being spent, in ways that I may or may not agree with, and I feel isolated. I feel as though my voice doesn't count. So maybe I won't vote next time. But people don't realize that actually hurts you rather than help you. Your vote is very important. It's something that people fought hard for. Women and minorities. Right. It wasn't always the case that you could vote. So it's important to speak up and use your vote to make a difference. And we saw in the last election, 10,000 votes here, 60,000 votes there. That's not many people when you look at the big scheme of things.
Right.
So, it could definitely change your world, and it definitely has changed ours. We have a very unique president in the office, and it's built up a lot of uncertainty for some majority of people, I would say. But the way the electoral college works is the way it works, and it's
Right.
been that way for hundreds of years. So.
Okay. Well, that I appreciate you elaborating a little bit more on that. One of the other questions that I wanted to touch on was about another post you had put up. It said, "Please listen to medical experts." Now, I've been watching a bunch of different videos myself and reading articles from different doctors who don't share the same opinions. One example, Professor Rodney Rode, he's an expert in infectious diseases and clinical microbiology at Texas State. And he's just one of a few doctors that I've seen that has said, according to data, things are pretty calm in the perspective of the viruses. So when I'm reading other doctors saying that, and some are saying the polar opposite and expressing, the concerns like the CDC and Dr. Fauci. So for the average person, or the lay person who's not really too sure who to trust for expert medical advice, are there any particular doctors or medical websites that you would advise people to follow and pay attention to in addition to the CDC website?
Besides the CDC website, I would hope that most people would have a primary care physician that they can call and that they trust. Obviously, if you're going through a pregnancy, you're going to trust your primary care physician to make sure that they're going to give you the right advice, and obviously you're going to have
Right.
other doctors that are with regards to the actual pregnancy, but at least you have your primary care that you can trust for different things. But the head of the infectious disease, Anthony, I forgot his last name, he's been on TV with President Trump a few times. He served 6 presidents. For him to stand up and to contradict the falsities that are coming out of the president and his administration
Right.
On the stage in front of people is pretty heroic, to say the least.
Yeah.
You're trying to push the truth out there. You have to look at agendas. Okay, you have to see where people have their allegiances with. Okay. Some of these nonprofits or some of these doctors work for organizations that are funded, possibly by certain, different entities, and you want to make sure that you're looking into all those things. I'm a forensic attorney by profession, so people come to me, companies come to me, and it might look like one thing, and then I dig a little deeper, and it's completely the opposite. And doing the forensic aspect of it is what I do for a living. It's not easy to do, but luckily a lot of the information's out there. It's just, unfortunately, the government makes it hard for you to find it.
Yeah.
And that's why we have the Freedom of Information Act and stuff like that to obtain and to go through certain things. And that's why you see, news organizations filing lawsuits against the administration and different organizations to get information, because that data is important. So, you have to have discernment when you're listening to people give you certain pieces of advice and they claim to be experts, because you always want to see if there's an agenda. Okay.
Well, that definitely makes sense. And one of the last things I want to touch on, just to kind of close up, is in your recent experience, with the school committee, and I'm sure hearing from a lot of parents and students, what would you say overall, how people are doing, the parents and the students, as far as adjusting to this closures and parents possibly being laid off and the quarantine on top of that? Are people adjusting fairly well, or is this, you think people are taking this really hard?
I think we're all on the same page where we don't like uncertainty,
Right.
and we don't like the fact that there's the unknown. People like a date certain. People are comfortable with just the way things have always been, and this is not the way it's always been. So it's definitely a change for most people. But as the days progress, I see people having more and more fun in our days.
Yeah.
And, we wake up, we send our kids to school, they come home, we come home from work, we eat dinner, we go to bed, and we kind of work for the weekend. And those 2 days go by so quickly. So for us to have this period of time to hit pause is starting to look good, I think, for most families. But in the beginning, they're like, okay, so we're just going to do this for 2 weeks. And now, they're thinking, now I have to think about it through May. I did have a recent conversation with a person that works for the court system. And the issue that she had is because she's not considered an essential employee, she still has to go to work, but she doesn't get that daycare that they're giving the doctors and other essential employees that the governor dictates. And so, she's going to have to take time off until May 4th, and that's going to be a hard thing to do. It's impacting different people for different reasons, but I think mainly we all share, again, that common gut feeling of uncertainty, and I just hope that families take this time to learn more about each other and to love on each other, and that's important.
Great. And just on the last note, the last thing I want to ask, is there anything else that you'd like to say to the residents of Lynn that you think might be important for them to hear?
I just think that they in the end, we're going to come out much stronger as a city, and we're going to see what's important, because we've been able to focus on that the past month and a half. Just checking on your neighbor is important. Making sure that the elderly have everything that they need is important. It's always been important, but it's even more so important now because of this disease, this illness. It's important to be informed and to consume the proper means of information, and really just be kind to one another. It's that simple, because you don't know when you're going to be gone from this world. So it's important to be kind to one another.
Right on. 100% agree with that, man. Well, Michael, I thank you again for your time, and I wish the best for you and your family. And
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you again, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a good one.
You too.